Hello, everyone, and welcome to What Fresh Hell? Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. This is Margaret.
And this is Amy, and today we're talking about chores, kids and chores. And is that framing even right? I guess that's I got big questions about this
Big
topic.
questions. I have some interesting answers, I think, like takes on this and what we're really talking about when we talk about chores. But first, Amy, it's mailbag.
Deanna came to Facebook and talked about our recent Fresh Take with Emily Rubin Persons. Great interview, if you haven't listened to it, on getting kids ready to go to college. Deanna says, Amy and Margaret, thanks for a great episode. I'm a mom of 3 little ones and a college professor. I've been teaching for 5 years, and from the professor's side, I've been surprised at how much hand-holding we are expected to do for undergrads today. We really do want to help college students succeed and are willing to go out of our way to help, but it can be frustrating if students aren't communicative with us. So it was really helpful to hear the parent student perspective of these challenges in this episode. It helped give me more understanding of and empathy for the challenges students face, and it gives me ideas on how to help my own kids start fostering the skills needed now, even though they're young. Thanks, Deanna.
That is the Emily Rubin Persons episode of our podcast, and we will link to it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Speaking of linking, we're going to be linking to some other stuff in the show notes about chores. Amy,
Mhm.
should kids do chores? Give me your blind hot take on this
I mean,
question.
I guess I would say, of course they do chores. This is sort of honed over, many years of doing this podcast. Of course they do chores, and the idea that you have to unload the dishwasher, cross that off the list, and you get a quarter, and that's your end of contribution to the house. I think that framing might be part of the problem.
Yeah, I think a lot of stuff I found when thinking about this was about framing and what we mean when we say chores. And I mean, it is an area in which there's a lot of conflicting advice. And I think there's a lot of family culture and larger culture stuff that goes into chores, which is interesting.
For sure. When we talked about the free time gap a couple of episodes ago and how it's was proven in this very wide-ranging study that women of all ages, going down to as young as 18, have less free time because they do more household work than boys. And that's got to play into this too, that even with our most, maybe we do need the structure, because even with our most well-meaning notions, we tend to assign more and more repetitive household tasks to our female kids.
Yeah. And I think that it's another area where it's something that we're doing wrong as moms, which is so repetitive in and of itself that, oh, well, this is really the right way to do chores, and chore charts are all wrong philosophically, and you need to invite children into chores. And I think that there's some realities around chores that I think I fall a little bit, having been forced to think about this when researching the episode, on the side of it's an evolving skill that I choose to wait to have it evolve rather than fighting it a lot when they're little. So my parallel would be like potty training, right? So people in different cultures who don't have access, especially to, plastic disposable diapers, are more likely to potty train children at 18 months
Yeah.
because they realize that they can pick up signals and that their children maybe will never wear diapers. They don't need diapers. And that makes sense.
Well, P.S. also, cloth diapers give a child a much more intense sensation of wetness than like a super great disposable diaper does. They barely notice that they went.
Correct. And so I had a woman in my mommy and me group who kind of thought we were crazy for using diapers. She would just literally, she didn't have a cloth diaper service. She would wrap like kind of rags around her baby, like an old t-shirt. And then she said, well, then you know that they're wet and they know that they're wet. And then they're done with it by, 18 months. And I don't know. I had 3 kids who were
That's
under
what I was going to say.
4
That
and I
requires, yeah.
couldn't get there. And I think it's probably better. I mean, it's clearly better for the environment. I think it's better in so many ways, but I could not get there. I
Okay.
just
Yeah. I mean,
wasn't able to do it.
is it better? They used to call that elimination communication. I remember
Yes.
it back in the day, and it was sort of part and parcel of attachment parenting. And yes, if you were with your kid all the time, your one kid, and attending to your kid's one needs, you will probably catch them in the 10 to 15 seconds before they go to the bathroom all over the floor. And you can do it sooner, but that requires an intensity of focus that you didn't have with 3
Didn't
kids.
have it. Was not available to me.
Right.
And so I kept my children in diapers until they were 3, at which point I would spend 24 to 48
Right.
hours being like, "Here's what we're doing. All right, you got it?" And they pretty much had it. And a couple of
Yeah.
kids wore pull-ups overnight, but for me, the work involved with doing diapers that way and early, it just was not worth it to me. It was not interesting to me. It was not available to me emotionally at that time.
So I think I might be taking the other side of this than you, but are you saying like, don't start too early with the chores because you're just gonna stand there while they do it anyway and
I'm
oversee it way too
saying
much?
that I am a person for whom the realities of get them involved with every aspect of cleaning and from an early age and, invite them in wasn't appealing.
Yeah. Well, see, this I always go back to Michaeleen Doucleff and her
Yes,
book
we
Hunt,
will be
Gather,
talking
Parent.
about her today. Let's
W
just
like
skip to Michaeleen
All right.
Doucleff
So she
because
said in this book and in the interview, and I've been thinking about it ever since, because I do think this is true, that your 1, 2, 3-year-old follows you around the house, wants a rag to wipe the counter just like you're doing, wants to chop the vegetables just like you're doing. And when we push them aside and when we give them a plastic play kitchen and with plastic vegetables and a plastic knife instead of showing them carefully, okay, maybe start with a butter knife. This is how we cut the apple. That that how we miss it is when they really, really wanna help and be included, we push them away, and then when they're 8, we say, "Come unload this dishwasher," and the moment is past. They're not interested in doing what we're doing anymore.
I think for me, that works as a great check-in and reminder,
Yep.
but maybe not a full reality because it does belie a little bit. And I mean, I think culturally, she makes a beautiful argument that, children are much more involved with the cooking and the cleaning and the household stuff in other world cultures. For me, the reality of 3 little kids helping with the cooking or helping with the dishes was fundamentally unappealing and did not match up well with my own lifestyle, which, I think that I get it. Yes, that why have a play kitchen when the kid could just be in the kitchen helping you cook? For me, because I needed to cook very quickly before one of my children ran out the door and ran
Mhm.
away. Like, I just that is a beautiful image to me, and it's helpful for me to remember. But I think there were years of my life where I really did prefer to have them at the plastic kitchen in the playroom, pretending to be me than under my feet while I was actually just trying to get food down 5 people's throats. And so I think that, as all things, it's great to think about all the options and then find the option that works
Right.
best for you.
Well, the most obvious reason that kids should do chores is because you don't work for them and you're all members of a household and you should all participate, right? You shouldn't have to do
Correct.
everything. But are there reasons in and of themselves, I think the answer is yes, but are there reasons in and of themselves that kids should do chores, that it's developmentally beneficial?
Amy, there are. Let's go to the facts,
Okay.
okay? Let's go to the articles. According to the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry,
Mhm. Know it
here
well.
are some of the reasons why children should do chores. To learn time management skills,
Okay.
you have to go clean your room before we go to church,
Right.
like
That's not a
how
4-year-old, but okay.
what will I yes. But I think even little kids, like, what time do we have to stop playing to get the playroom clean before we can go have our
Mm,
ice cream? It's a developing skill and it's part of a skill set.
Like the undesired task before the desired task.
Correct. I mean, I would argue, I don't want to rebut every single one of these, but these are also skills that they're learning in school where we're outsourcing a lot of our skill learning too.
Yes.
Uh, Developing organizational skills. I see the big point. I also think that I have 3 kids and some of them are organized and some of them are extremely disorganized, and I'm not sure that you can move the needle on organization as much as we sometimes tell ourselves you can.
Mhm. But it is fun for little kids, like actually sorting.
Yeah,
Like put the animals with the animals and and the people with the people in the playroom. Up until a certain age, that's a game, and then all of a
for
sudden it's a
sure.
chore.
Accepting responsibility in the family, I have no rebuttal to. I think that's a very important,
Right, I guess
like,
that's what I'm
our
saying,
family value is that we help.
that we all participate, yep.
But I will, in a let me put a pin in this rebuttal, say that I think that teaching kids to be helpers sometimes becomes part of mom's invisible workload in a way that is worth examining.
That's a good point. That's a good point. As you were saying, like if include your children in the making of the family meal turns into it taking longer and being more of a mess and more stressful for you, parent of 3 young children, then give yourself a break.
Yes. Learning to balance work and play from a young age, I think, is a useful overall skill. Again, I think a lot of it is happening at school, and I don't know. I don't know exactly when this skill develops. And foundation for functioning setting a good foundation for functioning independently. I would say this is very important to me, but falls within my personal choice to wait until later.
This is Emily Rubin Persons. Like don't wait until the week your kid leaves for school to have them be using the washer and dryer for the first time. Or do, but then you can start to lay the groundwork earlier.
Yeah, and I think that this is somewhere where we get kind of like, this is right and this is wrong. And looking back at my own childhood, the laundry was my mother's domain. I think she wanted it done a certain way. I think she really didn't want us ruining clothes in the washer. And I don't know if we had a crazy, literally, like, stone basement where the washer and dryer was. I mean, it was wild. You had to practically, like, crawl down there. It was like a dungeon.
We had this too, like a cellar. It just was dirt, right? And then
Yeah, but there was a washer
there's a
dryer and,
washer
like, a
dryer there too. Yeah.
crazy
Extra
folding
refrigerator.
table.
Mhm. Spider webs.
And I did my first load of laundry when I was in college, at which point one of my roommates, in a sort of a mean way, yelled at me, "Why don't you know how to do laundry?" Showed me how to do laundry, and 5 minutes later, I was doing laundry. I
Mhm.
I don't think Then again, I think we were expected to always do the dishes after every meal. Like, the parents sit at the end of a meal still, and it's like kids get up and clean up. Like, that's how we were raised. I think there's probably kids who don't know how to do the dishes and are great at laundry. I think that feeling this as a test of it is my job to prepare my child for living outside of the house in every way. I mean, I went to college, I think I've told this story before, and just kept writing checks and my balance would get to 0 and I would just keep writing checks because I thought that checks were like a credit card, that you could be at negative 375 and you would say, "Okay, but I'm gonna pay that back." But it's like, now I'm into my credit area of writing checks.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then the grocery store where I went to college had my name on, like, a bad check writing list on the thing. And, my parents were absolutely appalled that I didn't know that, but
Those
I
blind
figured
spots.
it out.
Yeah, but those blind spots I will to give your parents credit, and I think myself credit, they don't really appear until your kid leaves the house. So in my case, it's like, "Oh, you didn't know that checks go to 0 and then, like, you're in
You
trouble.
have
It's
to
not like a
stop
credit
writing
card."
them? Yeah.
Well, it turns out that, one of my college kids didn't understand they had Venmo, and the only thing they had attached to their own Venmo, which they set up themselves, was their credit card. And they were constantly, like, borrowing $25 from a friend, paying somebody else $40 for the cable, whatever, because they live in an off-campus house. And they were using their credit card, and they racked up, by the time I noticed, a hefty amount of like, what do they call those? Like cash balances, not cash balances. What do they call it when you travel abroad?
Debt.
Finance charges, I guess.
Finance
You go back.
finance charges.
by the time I clued into this, my child had racked up a hefty amount of finance charges on their credit card statement for using Venmo like it was cash in their pocket. And had I ever explained to my kid that, no, 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 you can't just use that? No. And we both kind of learned the hard way. Do I
Right, that
think
beeps and boops are real money.
you're right, beeps and boops are real money, thank you, but right. Would teaching my kid to count change at a younger age have contributed towards more financial literacy? Maybe yes, but it's not one-to-one. So you kind of find out this stuff. I have another kid who didn't realize that you can't put food in your garbage in your dorm room and leave it there indefinitely. That you do have to,
Yeah.
like, eventually walk it down the hall to the big garbage and put it in there, or else you'll get flies. This was something we had to learn the hard way.
All right, we're gonna talk more about this because I think there's a lot to say here after this break. So, yes, I think the one-to-one of chores means success is like all the other one-to-ones, not real.
Right. It's
You're
like it
gonna
teaches
miss stuff.
resilience. Right. It's pretty they're learning lessons about how to be a person in the world. They're not learning how to be a perfectly responsible adult on day 1
No, and you're
or
kind of
year 1.
learning to pick your battles.
Yeah.
I have a child right now who's dressing in a way that I do not like. It's not my favorite. And my
We're
mother
just gonna
and
leave it like that. Let everybody who's gonna leave a little space for everybody to imagine what that might be. I don't even know you
do
guys, but I'm
I
loving
try not to
imagining,
talk
filling in the
about my
blanks.
kids specifically on the podcast, but yes, there's a
But I
style choice that I'm
there's a
out
style choice
on.
that we might not agree with. Okay.
My mother and I fought constantly about what I wore. And looking back, I now, of course, have more sympathy for her of it is really annoying when your child is wearing things that you think are they don't look good, it's not appropriate, whatever your objection might be. But I'm just not gonna fight the battle. I'm just
Mhm.
gonna say, "Okay." But do I think that this child isn't gonna know how to dress themselves when they're 30? I bet they'll be fine. I bet they'll figure it out like I did eventually. So I'm just not gonna fight it at all. And I think that chores sometimes yes, nobody is wrong who is saying doing chores is connected to kids who have, better, probably mental health outcomes and, better
Self-sufficiency. Right, right.
self-sufficiency, and they're more able to function on their own. But you're gonna miss some of the things, and I think that the story of this is another thing on your list that you have to make sure they know how to do, and there's a right way to do it, and somehow people in France are doing it, and you have to read the book and figure that out. I reject the premise.
How do they do it at school? I mean, I know how they do it at school. There's a chore wheel, and it's Margaret's turn to be the chair pusher inner, and it's Amy's turn to be the door holder. These, chores which our 5-year-olds take with great gravity and seriousness and pride, right? I am this week's door holder. Um, is there a way, because I was just saying, like the chore charts, it's work, but is there a way to bring that into the house? I'm contradicting myself before saying, "Don't give your kid one job. I unload the dishwasher, and then I get to, like, kick back while mom does everything else." But is it the sort of pomp and circumstance around it that makes it easier for your kids to have buy-in?
I mean, I think for us, it was an evolving journey that was informed to some degree by hearing and reading about like, I am not trying to poo-poo Micheline Doucleff's work. I
Mhm,
think that book, Hunt, Gather, Parent, really changed my ideas about a lot of
mhm.
things. I just think there's you take in a lot of input and then you figure out what works in your house. For me, with 3 kids under 4, having kids at that point help with the laundry, the cooking, or the cleaning was not worth it to me. I wanted to get them to nap time, clean up the house to the degree that I could.
Right.
Did we maybe on Saturdays sometimes say, okay, it's playroom cleanup day? Like you grab all the superheroes and you grab all the magnet tiles. Yes, but those were kind of outlier events. To me, integrating children into cooking and cleaning when they were young, for me, was not palatable. It
Well
just was not an enjoyable idea.
well, to be clear, Micheline Doucleff is not saying that we should have chore charts either. I think she's kinda like,
No, no, no,
"Nobody
I'm
else does chore
saying
charts. That it's just us trying to, put all this structure around something that's supposed to happen very organically."
well, yes, and let me say that I'll go through a little bit of a recent interview with Michaeleen Doucleff just to sort of sum up some of the things she talked about
Okay.
on our podcast.
Okay.
Her kind of philosophy about this and this, read, hunt, gather, parent. We'll link it in the show notes because I don't want to, sum up her work in a way that's not accurate, which maybe I will do. But she argues that children are born assistants. They want to help. They
Yeah.
want to do chores. That's universal.
Right.
And so don't shoo away children when they ask to help, that we have a instinct to be like, no, no, you'll get dirty, you'll get messy. No, you'll slow me down. Like involve children in helping. That is the natural kind of way. She says, I don't allow my child to help me because I know she's going to do a competent job. She pushes back against the notion of excluding children until they're competent to help. She says it's kind of like an investment. You put up the mess and extra time right now, and over the course of years, you're helping the child to learn and then be an actual helper, and kind of rejecting the idea of like, over here is the plastic kitchen where you play, and in here is an actual kitchen. Like, why aren't you just in here with me helping?
I do think it would have helped with my kids when they were young. I had one picky eater, and then when you have two little kids, it's easy to all of a sudden have two picky eaters because you're making food for the picky eater and the younger sibling. That had I included them more and like now is the fun time that we make dinner together, as much of a hassle as that would have been, it would have introduced them a little earlier to this is a head of broccoli and here's how we're going to turn it into something delicious to eat. That might have helped a little sooner, instead of you guys play in there and I'll keep one eye on you while I cook the chicken nuggets again because that's all you'll eat. I
I
don't
think
know.
that's
Maybe I'm just feeling
probably
bad about stuff
right.
that's not
And we
fair.
talked to Mark Bittman on our episode, and he was talking about he has a beautiful cookbook for cooking with kids. And one of my kids is very lit up by it and is cooking and learning and reading it, and it's exciting. And two of my kids are like, I don't care what's for dinner.
Right, right.
I think I would take this more as an opportunity to find opportunities than I
I
must
should have
make a
done this
radical
better.
lifestyle change. For
Uh-huh.
me, it just would not have worked as a full lifestyle investment. I understand the logic around it. For me, I did not actually want the kids to be learning and growing during cooking time.
Uh-huh.
Cooking for several years of my life was getting food that enough people will eat so that I can go to bed. And it wasn't for me the right time to be like, this is a learning activity.
Did you have ever a chore chart or a poster or a whiteboard or whatever, like saying like this week, kid A is in charge of cleaning up the front hall and kid B is in charge of school lunches?
No, never
I
did.
never did either. We did have assignments growing up in my house. I mean, we had 6 kids, so I was in charge of school lunches for myself and my brother, and my brother was in charge of unloading the dishwasher. I remember that. But again, I kind of look at it like, well, I mean, it took me my lunch preparation was, shoddy at best. I mean, I just made a peanut butter sandwich every day. Yes, you could bring peanut butter to school back then. Like peanut butter, bag of Fritos, thing of milk, the end. I think I spent, 90 seconds per lunch. And then I was sitting pretty. I didn't feel like I had to kick in any more than that.
I'm going to say the way that we did it was I did everything for the first maybe up to 10 years because I was so overwhelmed by having 3 kids closely spaced.
Right. The last
that
thing you have to the
the
bandwidth
last
of
thing I had
organizing.
time
Right.
for. And maybe you could argue that, well, if I had gotten them involved earlier, they would have helped more. But I think my kids are pretty helpful. And I think that the lesson and hearing these different perspectives was stay open to when they're ready to be involved. So I have a kid who got interested in cooking pretty early and would make family dinners. It was mostly lasagna. That was their go-to meal, and they really liked making lasagna.
Lasagna is pretty, labor intensive.
Yeah, I think
For a
there's something
person
about the fact that you
impressive.
just, like, ground the meat and then you put the layers in, and they really liked to eat it, that they were the lasagna chef. Uh, for whatever reason, there's 2 kids who really wanted a second cat. Those kids do the litter
The cat
box
care. Uh-huh.
and the cat care and the feeding of the cat. And sometimes dispute among themselves whose turn it is to do what. And they will now like get out a calendar and go through and be like, if I start tonight, then you have to do it these nights. And
Wow. Wow.
they're figuring that out. And I will say the cat box went from basically them just like scooping the cat box, leaving litter everywhere to now the cat box is cleaning out the cat box, vacuuming up the area around it, occasionally cleaning off the lid. Like they have evolved in the chore. And now the kids, but I will say my kids, I just did all the dishes. They walked away from the table until they were 10 years old. And then at some point I said, enough of this. You guys start doing the dishes. And I would say there was a couple of weeks of grumbling and well, I don't know how to wash a dish.
Yeah, you don't
Let me
right.
show you. It's
You
this,
wouldn't
it's
like
this,
how
it's
I load the
this.
dishwasher. Like, try
Yeah,
me. I wouldn't have such a problem with
and
it.
calling someone back down from upstairs and saying, "You need to re-rinse this. I found a full piece of pasta in the pot. You need to redo it." And so I did very much my potty training version is what I'm saying, which I just did everything myself for the long haul. And then once I kind of read that, wait a minute, why am I still doing this? Okay, you guys start doing it. And they grumble about things. Even since they were little, I would say I would always call when I was driving in with groceries if they weren't with me. Everybody unloads the groceries. Come on out front. I don't care what you're doing.
Oh,
Drop
I
what
feel
you're
like by the
doing and
time
come
they
unload
they
the
sigh
dishwashers.
heavily and put their phones aside and come outside, it's done already.
Yeah, although that is one thing I insist on. And it's just I think that it's funny how these things work out that my kids will be waiting on the porch when I call that I'm home with groceries because somehow they know that don't mess with mom and the groceries, and they stay in the kitchen until they're all away in the right places. They all do their own laundry. Um,
Yeah, that's great.
I don't care how it's done, and I don't it's not it doesn't get folded. I just went upstairs to try to find something, and it's missing, and there's a pile of pile of clean laundry on the floor that they're picking stuff out of. I mean, they're terrible at it, but they're doing it, and I think my, um good quality as a parent in vis-a-vis chores is that I am not very hung up on how stuff gets done. I don't want the refrigerator to look good when it's done. I want the stuff away and in the right compartment. And if
And
that's
nothing
done,
smells, I'm the
yeah, I
only one
mean,
in our
don't
house
put the
who does
milk on the
that.
side. I'll call you back down and I'll make you fix it.
I feel like no matter how many times this is the one thing, it's like, I want somebody else to notice this besides me. Like, it smells in the kitchen. Why does it smell? Oh, it's in the refrigerator. There's something in the refrigerator that's in the back that's been in there for a month. And I feel like no matter how many times I mention this, I'm the only one who does that, the noticing part, which
Oh,
is when you're
Amy,
doing
you're
chore
bringing
charts,
us
you're doing
into
the
a
noticing,
spoiling for part 3. We will be back and talk about the
the
philosophy
noticing.
of noticing. Okay, we're back. And Amy, you brought up something that I have thought about, but we have never, I don't think, discussed in this particular way. And it's an article by Morgan Music for Scary Mommy on the work of Sam Kelly, which is an awareness that the whole responsibility of motherhood is more exhausting than the sum of its tasks. It's a lot of like the thinking and the noticing. And Sam Kelly writes about this and teaching, as you were just saying, that the first step in getting anything done around the house, including chores, is noticing something
Yep.
needs done,
Yep.
needs
This
to
is
get done before
this is the
doing it.
same this is the thing that I'm starting to read a lot about on Instagram now. People saying, when your family members say to you, "Just tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Right.
Just make a list and I'll follow it." That is still work for the default parent, the person in charge of all this invisible labor. If you have to list it, if you have to notice, something smells in this kitchen, let me go figure out where it is, then you haven't really handed over tasks yet, because that's the first part of the task, is noticing that the litter box needs to be changed without mom saying, "Will you please change this litter box?"
Right. Well, and that's right. And it's not, is it that they don't notice it, or is it that if I don't do it, there's always someone who will,
I
and I
think it's
think that
very
that
yeah. I think it's very comfortable for everybody else in the house to let you continue to be the one who notices.
And I think this is something, and I think this is easier with older kids, and it is something that I'm reinforcing constantly right now. And we'll link to this article, but Kelly says traditional chore charts reinforce the skipping over the first crucial step of task execution, the noticing, and
Yeah.
defaults the emotional labor onto me, the mom, the woman, to carry the load of knowing what needs to get done and then doing the work of assigning tasks.
Yep.
The goal of notice and do is to help them develop strong enough muscles that they'll eventually be able to participate in shouldering the mental load in age appropriate ways, knowing what needs to be done around the house without needing me to assign them a job task.
Or the chore chart or the spinny wheel. Right. You just see what needs to be done. Yeah. And you'll get lots of resistance. So I wrote about this. There's an essay in Happy to Help where I talk about trying to assign this task out to my family. You'll all have to start doing more around here because I have to write this book. And they said, well, just tell us what to do. And I'm like, no, I want you to notice what to do. And to give the ending away of the essay, it works, but it doesn't work right away, right? Like, of course, they're going to say, like, but I can't see it. I just don't notice it like you do. Well, I'm just not as good at noticing that we're out of coffee as you are. Well, work harder. It is something, it's not one and done, but the getting this right, the repeated effort that it will take on your part to say, like, no, I'm not going to make a list. You're just going to notice that things need to be done and you're going to do it, does eventually bear fruit with older kids.
And I think this is worth the effort of dialing in all the time
Yeah.
and giving voice to. And I find myself now with my teens all the time. When you leave your socks there, what do you think the next step is? And believe me, they're not like, great, wait, mother, I guess I assume you'll pick them up for me. And that's wrong of me. Believe me, they roll their eyes as they pick them up. But I do think that putting in that step of noticing,
Mm-hmm.
when you put your dirty plate, you just scrape it and leave it in the sink. And often I am very jokey about it. And I'm like, oh, guess what? The cleaning fairies quit. They're not coming. So putting your dirty dish in the sink is actually no longer the last step of a dish. The cleaning fairies are striking this week, and you'll have to rinse it and put it in.
I was
And
just talking to somebody who he said he has to, in his house, when his husband leaves the dirty dish behind, my friend will often make the joke like, oh, is Elaine coming over? Elaine being his mother-in-law, like, oh, Elaine must be coming this evening, which is how he indicates to his partner that if his mother isn't coming to clean his dish, then maybe he should come do it.
it's his turn.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, there is a historical idea that Elaine becomes Amy at some
Yeah,
point, right?
right.
That you have always had the dishes done for you. And, I do think that these are changing and we're pushing back against things. And I've told the story of my father's friend who, I'm talking about men who are now born in the 30s and 40s, that his wife got so sick that he had to hold her up while she changed the baby's diaper. The idea that he would be involved in that was too ridiculous to
Right.
contemplate.
Right. He
But
could hold up
yes.
her nearly unconscious body while she did it. That was so generous.
We have to, at some point, actually give voice to Elaine is not coming. I
Right.
am not taking over this spot.
Right.
And so and I think that we have never done chore charts. I think if chore charts work for you, do chore charts. I think
Right.
that they are effective. I think they're fine. I think for us, again, I didn't want to do the work of doing a
Right.
chore chart. I
Right.
wasn't
Yes, the chore
interested.
charts also work. Right.
My sister-in-law had an adorable thing with all these pockets, and then your name was on a popsicle stick. And if your name was in the pocket, that was your job for the week. And we've just kind of settled out that I have a kid who takes out the garbage. I have a kid who does the litter box, and there's a kid who feeds the cat, and there's a kid who vacuums. I don't know. It's just kind of sorted out among different lines, and I don't think they're gendered, and I don't worry about it. And then now I'll often say, Saturday from 12 to 3, we need to clean the house, and everybody just take a job. And, we've done enough of the, You take all the garbage out first, then you put all the things that have a place back in their place, and then you can talk to me about the things that don't have a place. And I think giving voice to your spouse and your kids about, if you help me do the dishes by asking me questions every step along the way. I worked with a director once, and he would say, "This is the last time I want to give this note. Put your hat on before you cross the stage." And I think about, we use a lot of theater metaphors because we're theater geeks, but sometimes say to my kids, "This is the last time I want to give this note. Wash You have to wash all the food off before it goes in the dishwasher." Spoiler, reader, it was not the last time I had to say it,
Right.
but I want you to get to a point, or I'll say, "Can I make cookies?" You can make cookies if I'm not involved at all, and when I go in afterwards, I don't know that cookies were made. Those are the parameters of
Mm.
you making cookies.
Mhm. You know, the invisible part of the invisible workload, I think there's a lot of really fair resentment and frustration about how everybody thinks this is invisible. But I do think there is a world in which our children really do think the kitchen gets magically cleaned
Sure.
up. It is invisible. And because they left and it was a mess, and then they come home the next day and it's all cleaned up, right? It is invisible to them, the work sometimes. And we have to make the work visible, and we have to teach them how to notice and help them develop that muscle. Um, and that's work too. But it's sort of the teaching a man to fish kind of thing. And I think it probably is better than your job is to make the name cards for Thanksgiving, and then like you get to play Xbox while I do everything else. It's not
I
really fair.
think I really like this idea of noticing.
Mhm.
That, to me, first of all, Micheline Doucleff, noticing when your kids want to help and
Mhm.
inviting them into that process
Mhm.
when it works for you.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm big on, like, my kids always put up the Christmas decorations. I don't care if they look bonkers. I have friends
Right, right, right.
who have a Christmas tree that is like the white and green and black bulbs that sit at exactly, it looks like something out of a display window. They don't want their kids to help with that. They want their Christmas tree to look like the Tiffany's window,
Right.
which is a completely reasonable choice. But I think noticing when help is available, and then you make the decision about whether or not that help works for you. And so maybe, like, cookie baking on Saturdays, I want all the kids in there and all get covered in flour and we have the 2 hours to clean up. But efficiency meal, get out of my face. I have to make this
Mm.
as quickly as possible, is totally fine.
Mhm.
Then noticing when your kids are able to help, that if you find yourself grabbing dishes, this is a 10-year-old, they could be doing this by themselves. Or we need a bunch of firewood moved to the back and we have 2 teenage boys at home. That sounds
Yeah,
like a good job for
they
them.
can do it. Yeah.
And hey, am I gonna throw them $20? Maybe, if I wanna, do it without so much complaining. Like, however you
Right.
get it done is
Right,
your
it's fine.
business.
And a little bit of branding never
You
hurts.
love
I
your
mean,
brands,
I
Amy.
love
Hit
my
us. Do
branding
you have
and
a
it
rhyme?
works. No, I just have it's a trademarked phrase, but you can use it if you want. It's the power clean. I will say to, like, when our house tips into true chaos on a Saturday morning while everybody's looking at their phones, I'll say, "Guys, in 15 minutes, it's time for power clean." And they go like, "Oh." And then they do it.
They help.
I set a timer. Let's see how, I use the Google Home in the kitchen, and I set it for 20 minutes, and we see how much we can get done. And I'm telling you, like, I have kids who are like, "Oh, this is so annoying." And they do it. And they
They
do
do
it.
it. My sister-in-law calls that the super fun cleaning party. You're invited. And it's the same
Like that.
concept.
I
We're
like that too.
all chipping in and we're doing this. And I think the noticing goes the other way too, that when my kids get to, like, "Why do I have to help?" Because who else is gonna do it? I'll
Right.
answer that question for you. And I think that helping kids notice that, making they say about a director, another theater metaphor coming at you, people prepare. They say that the best director, you love the show, but you don't notice the work. Like, you
Right.
never see the directing.
The
And that sometimes
scenes.
I
Yeah.
think of that all the time. Like, sometimes you watch something, you're like, "Oh, look at how clever you thought you were." I think that's wrong for mothering, that I think that maybe previous generations thought that that was their job, that everything would always be perfect and no one would notice their work. And I reject that as a premise. I think that really helping your kids notice. And I do that even if I have, every once in a while people come in to clean, they come in. Oh, the house is so beautiful. Yeah, these people worked really hard for 3 hours today to clean up the whole house.
Mm,
So don't leave your socks around. It was expensive and people worked hard to make it this way.
mhm.
None of this. I want to kind of pull the curtain on all of that for my kids so that you say, like, hey, we're all in this together. And
That's a good takeaway to make the work of the invisible elves while they were at school or while they were doing their homework visible. Right.
yeah.
It took me 45 minutes to clean the kitchen after put the dishes in the dishwasher, and thank you for doing that. I still had another 45 minutes of work to do here to get all the counters clean or whatever.
Yeah. And I do
Not
find
not
myself saying that.
complaining. It's just like this did take a while. This is a
That's
lot of
it. It's
work.
visibility. And my husband's been traveling unexpectedly and a lot lately. And I find myself saying to the kids, if you guys walk out now, who's finishing cleaning this
Mhm.
kitchen? I know you guys know that I'm tired. Like everyone, let's do it until it's done.
Mhm.
Or you have a lot of homework. Okay, I'll stay and clean the kitchen because I know you have a lot of homework tonight. But like, not just letting it be the cleaning fair. Elaine is not coming. That's
Right.
the thing.
Elaine
Like,
is not
it's not
coming.
Elaine. I
Yeah.
love that. I mean, I think we solved the
We
chores
solved it. If
forever.
Elaine's not coming, just
If
make
Elaine's
it
not
visible.
coming, someone else needs to do
Yeah.
it. That's the solution to chores.
Hey, everyone, it's the countdown to Happy to Help. It's coming January 7th. I'm very excited. It's coming soon. I'm making it visible. Please pre-order the book if you haven't yet. Please tell friends about it. This is a great New Year's present to yourself.
Friends, it's such a good book. I had the privilege to read it very early, and I'm telling you, you love Amy. You're going to love it. Go pre-order Happy to Help today. And with that, thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks. So long.